Hello, friend, and welcome to the SpeechGoods podcast / show / whatever you want to call it. Super excited to be talking to you today. Now, if any of you are familiar with the show or you've been following my journey, I love talking about personal finance, money, mindset, especially as it's related to SLPs, PTs, and OTs. I love talking about doing the dang thing and just following your dreams and making your money work for you as a speech language pathologist. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back from the money talk today, and I actually do not have a guest with me, but I have a treat for you. A large part of my financial journey and my road to getting out of that SLP burnout, feeling underpaid and overworked, was opening up my own private practice. And a large part of opening up my private practice and the success that I've been able to have with my private practice was niching down and finding a specific area that I could become really good at, especially since my particular area has a little bit of an oversaturation of SLPs. And contrary to a lot of popular beliefs in the SLP field, myofunctional therapy is not new. There's a lot of evidence that talks about the efficacy of myofunctional therapy and the benefits of it. The problem is you're not going to find that evidence in the speech language pathology journals. You're actually going to be finding that in the dental and orthodontic journals and publications. But I'm not going to get into a bunch of research today. I really want to get into answering some of the main questions that I receive. And then at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you some resources for places or courses or people that you can follow on social media, some free Facebook groups, or even some courses that you may want to take that I have also taken and absolutely loved. So the first question I'm going to answer for you today is, what is myofunctional therapy? Some people call it myo. Some people refer to it as oral facial myofunctional therapy, oromyofunctional therapy. Those are all just a bunch of ways to say the exact same thing. So that is one point of confusion that I know some people will get. If myo is different from oral facial myo or oral facial myofunctional myo, it's all the same thing. A lot of people in the space just call it myo because, let's be honest, oral facial myofunctional therapy, see if you can say that 10 times fast. So now that I've gotten a little bit of the semantics out of the way for you, I'm going to explain myofunctional therapy to you the same way that I try to explain it to patients. The easiest way for people to kind of wrap their head around what it is I basically say it's physical therapy for your face. It's very much about muscles and how the different muscle groups are working together, whether that's actually the muscles of your face or the muscles in your tongue. So there's actually 8 muscles in your tongue. 4 of those help to move your tongue in space, so moving it up and down, side to side. And then there's also 4 muscles that are intrinsic muscles that help to change the shape. So it helps you to narrow the tongue or broaden it or to make a bowl like this. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you can just imagine me making a bowl. So that's very much what it is. So we're looking at, are we able to use all of these muscles in a functional way to get the results that we want? So when I am doing an evaluation on someone, and it's a myofunctional evaluation, I'm looking at how the oral facial musculature is impacting their swallow, is impacting potentially their speech, and their oral rest posture. So a lot of the trainings that you may or may not go to, there's a pretty good concise whatever the word is, that there's like 3 main big goals of traditional myofunctional therapy. So the first goal is achieving appropriate, what we call oral rest posture. Okay. So the goal is whenever you are at rest, whenever you are just sitting there watching TV, your mouth should be closed. So we do not want anyone we don't want anyone sitting watching TV with their mouth hanging open like that. We're not trying to be Napoleon Dynamite. So we're going to have our mouth closed, tongue up to the palate, resting on your palate. We don't want to have our tongue hanging down in the bottom of the mouth, and breathing through your nose. So when a client is entering myofunctional therapy, those are kind of those big goals that you're looking for. And obviously there's lots of different ways to get there. I'm not going to go into that into this episode. Again, I'm going to include so many resources of people who are doing amazing things in the field at the end of this video so that you can learn more. As SLPs, myofunctional therapy is super applicable to what we do, and it is also in our scope of practice, because a lot of times whenever these muscles aren't working the right way, it may or may not just affect oral rest posture, swallowing, or nasal breathing. It may also affect things like speech articulation or feeding, which that is like right up our alley, guys. That's what we do. I've even gotten referrals for myofunctional therapy for kids who aren't even having feeding or speech difficulties, but they're having a lot of dental issues going on. A great example is if we're having a lot of cavities in the back of our mouth and our back molars. Part of that can be them not being able to get their tongue to the back of the teeth to be able to clean them, right? Whenever you just had a big meal, what's something you do with your tongue? You kind of move it around and make sure that you can clean your teeth. Again, that is definitely not my scope of practice as a speech language pathologist, but I will get referrals for myofunctional therapy to help with tongue mobility and range of motion and things like that so that they can do those tasks for dental health reasons. So Char Boshart actually has a really great podcast called The Speech Link. You can actually get CEU credits through Speech Therapy PD by listening to the podcast and completing like their little quiz and stuff after, which is really, really cool and convenient for you. I'm not affiliated with them at the moment. It's just something for you to know for your own knowledge because I thought that was super beneficial. Anyways, she has an amazing podcast episode, or it's a couple episodes. I think it's episode, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. I think it's episode 33, and I think she splits it into 2 different parts, and she calls it the perfect oral motor storm. And she takes us through the history of why and how this idea that oral motor isn't evidence-based had kind of came about in the SLP field, and how this idea sort of kept going, and what ensoms actually are versus myofunctional therapy. And that's a point I really want to drive home for you. I'm not going to get into all that research. That is a podcast episode. She does a much better job at it and explaining it than I ever could, but also recognizing that ensoms are not the same thing as myofunctional therapy. So the question that I get asked a lot is, how did I get started in myofunctional therapy? This was not something that I had ever heard of in graduate school. In my grad program, like many grad programs are still teaching to this day, is that oral motor or ensoms, non-speech oral motor exercises, are not evidence-based. There's a lot of confusion with this topic, and I think it's really important to understand that orofacial myofunctional therapy and ensoms are not the same thing. Okay, back to the question I was going to answer. How did I get interested in or learn about myofunctional therapy? So funnily enough, in my area, there is a local physical therapist who is absolutely amazing. And she's actually, at least as of now that I know of, the only physical therapist to be allowed to attend the one of the IAOM Myo course, which I'll talk about that later in the episode about different specific organizations and courses for you so that you can go look those up. And she's also the only physical therapist to ever get her COM. So it's super interesting that the main person doing myofunctional therapy in my area was not an SLP or a registered dental hygienist, which those are really the 2 main professions that you're going to see doing myo. There are OTs that do it as well, but just sort of in general, it's usually going to be SLPs and RDHs. But in my area, there just so happened to be a PT who was doing myofunctional therapy, and she now has her COM. So that is a certified orofacial myologist. Again, I'll get into some certifications a little bit later so you can have that information. But what ended up happening was I was having one kiddo. We were working on our tick. This child was 5. They had been getting speech therapy for years and years and years. And I just noticed, I felt like I kept training him, especially for like S's and S blends. I kept like trying to do what I was told to do in graduate school and helping him with phonetic placement. We practice it in isolation. We practice it in words. But honestly, like his tongue just wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I ended up realizing like he couldn't do it. So a great example is I would try to get the phonetic placement for, and if you're not watching this on YouTube, I'm going to describe it as I say it. But I was trying to get the phonetic placement to get the tongue up kind of behind the teeth. And you know how we need that narrowing of the tip of the tongue to make that nice S, right? And we want that single stream of air to come through to produce that S sound that makes that nice fricative sound, right? S. What would happen with this particular child is it was super slushy. So he was able to finally get the tongue behind the teeth instead of putting it like up against the teeth or pressing it in the middle of the teeth like this. But it was still so slushy, and like I had tried everything. I even tried a trick where I introduced it as a different sound. So like I took like the snake sound out of it. I even tried to introduce it as a new sound, and he just could not get rid of the slushy. And I ended up just kind of asking him, okay, can you even do this? And I opened my mouth and I just lifted my tongue up, and he had so much difficulty with that task. And so I went home and I was like, what is going on? I'm doing all the things I was supposed to do. I felt terrible because I felt like, we had made progress in therapy, but like I had kind of exhausted a lot of my tools in my toolbox. In the back of my head, I was kind of wondering like, okay, do I need to refer this child out? I'm really not sure. I'm not sure what's going on. Like this might be over my head. Then I actually, whenever I was kind of Googling and, going down the rabbit hole that is SLP Facebook groups, goodness gracious, I found out about tongue ties. And I just was doing some research. I know that this child had some feeding difficulties and a history of feeding difficulties, and a history of feeding difficulty with nursing, and with breastfeeding. And so I decided, I kind of just brought it up to mom. I definitely said, I'm really not sure. I don't know how to assess for this. This may be what's going on, but I referred her to a local ENT who regularly dealt with those and said, maybe he can help you. So thankfully, this ENT that I referred this particular child to ended up referring him to the local PT who did myofunctional therapy. And me and the mom were super, we communicated a lot. She let me know how everything was going. And she kind of would show me like the exercises that this PT was having him do. And at first I was like, this is oral motor. Like I was told that oral motor isn't evidence-based. Like this isn't gonna work. Honestly, like I kind of thought it was like dumb at first. Obviously I didn't say that. But that's what I have been told in all my training is that, having a kid move their tongue in a certain way or whatever isn't going to do anything for speech. But he got better with his speech. Like sounds that I was not able to elicit before with correct placement. He still needed help with the placement, but it was like, oh my gosh, he suddenly had access to the movements. And this was before a tongue tie, this was before a tongue tie procedure, like anything like that. This was just like, okay, this is wow. Like I saw like such a big impact in his speech intelligibility and also in his ability to be able to follow my commands for getting the phonetic placement that I was trying to get, especially for fricatives. So needless to say, I immediately wanted to connect with this PT in her practice and just be like, what are you doing? Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I went down the myofunctional therapy rabbit hole. And then at this time when I had this particular patient, I was not working for myself. I was working for someone else. And then as I started getting really interested in myo and wanting to take the trainings, that's when some of that desire to have my own private practice and a little bit more autonomy kind of came about. And honestly, I just took it from there. I took a few like sort of basic online intro courses to kind of just learn more about what myo was and kind of learn a little bit more of the basics. And then I eventually did invest into a 1 week long intro course with the IAOM. I will tell you this, although I've been doing myo for almost 2 years now, there's so much more to learn. Every kid is so different. There's always something new. So that's why one of the local dentists that I work with a lot, whenever I had my first conversation with her, that's what she told me. She said, welcome to the rabbit hole. And it is very, very much a rabbit hole, but it's a fascinating one. And it's definitely, if you want to get into myofunctional therapy, you need to make sure that you're prepared to be a lifelong learner because there's still so much more that we're learning. And then again, as we know, every child is different. And then kind of blending the myofunctional therapy with also their feeding goals or their speech goals, or having to use different tools. It's definitely an art, but it is an art that I love. Now I'm going to talk about some specific resources for you, organizations, courses. That way you can get some really great takeaways and action steps from this episode so that if you want to get interested or learn more about myofunctional therapy and go do the dang thing, you can. So I'm going to give you some basics about different organizations and resources sort of in the myo world. That way you have the information and you can choose to go with whatever things that you want to go with that is going to fit your goals and your budget, etc. Also, keep in mind that this episode is being filmed on October 14th of 2021. So if you're listening to this at a much later date, there may be some updates. So you just give your girl grace because I can't predict the future. So to my knowledge, there's one main organization for myofunctional therapy, and then there's another one that also provides certification, but the other one, the IAOM, is kind of like the really, really big one and probably the most well-known. Now, just as an additional piece of information, there are other associations, companies, or whatever that are associated with myofunctional therapy, or some that are associated with specifically tongue ties, like the ICAP Association. I'm not going to talk about those in this video because that's just all the things. So I'm going to focus specifically on sort of the main nuts and bolts of the myo world. And I 100% encourage you to do your own research and continue to learn more. I want you to use this episode and this information as a starting off point, not as your end all be all for your information about myo. The first organization I'm going to talk about is probably the biggest, and that is called the IAOM. So IAOM stands for International Association of Orofacial Myology. So this particular organization, you can go to their website. They have a directory for people who have taken their courses, and they have a provider directory for people who have gotten their certification. They have research articles. It's a really, really great place to start if you're interested in myofunctional therapy and just kind of want to look a few things up. They do offer a certification. This is what we hear as like the gold standard in the myo world. It's called the COM, or the Certified Orofacial Myologist. I think there's only like 300 and something or 400 and something like in the whole world, which is pretty crazy. It's definitely a rigorous process to get your COM. I personally have not gone for my COM. I do have some colleagues and friends that have their COM, and they're absolutely fabulous, and they worked very, very hard to get that certification. But just know that it's not like a quick, like I take my course with the IAOM and then I become a COM. The course and taking sort of that 1 week main myofunctional therapy course with IAOM, that is the course that I took. I took mine with Christy Gatto, who is absolutely amazing. I highly recommend her course as well. But once you take that 1 week course, then there's steps after that you have to take to get a COM. So you do have to do an exam, and I know it's a fairly long process. You have about 6 months to complete the exam, as well as what they call an on-site, where they actually watch you evaluate and treat patients from different stages of treatment. Another one big organization in the myo world is called the AOMT, the Academy of Orofacial Myofunctional Therapy. I believe this was started by Sandra Holtzman. They used to offer they called it the COM, but it was actually a QOM. So it stood for Qualified Orofacial Myofunctional Therapist. But now they've actually started offering something called the COMT. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but now it's the COMT. So that stands for Certified Orofacial Myofunctional Therapist as well. If that's a certification you're interested in, or you're interested in the COM, again, go to those websites. I'll have all of that in the show notes so that you can go and look at their information. The AOMT also has a lot of fabulous resources and information. You can even buy Sandra Holtzman's Myo Manual over on that website. So again, lots of goodies for you to go check out. So one common misconception that I do want to be sure to clear up for you is that you do not have to be certified to practice myofunctional therapy. I think there's some people who think that, oh, well, I have to go and get a COM or something like that in order to be able to do myofunctional therapy at all. That is actually not the case. If you're an SLP, myofunctional therapy is already in your scope of practice, boo. So go do the dang thing. Now, obviously, we're going to be ethical and not practice modalities that we have not had training in, but you do not have to go through the full process of getting certified in order to do myofunctional therapy. Now, there are lots of benefits to certification, and if that is something that you want to do, again, this episode is meant to be a jumping off point to help you kind of give you some options about what's available out there if you're interested in myofunctional therapy. And certification is definitely a great option for you if you think that's going to fit for you and your practice. So one of the big ways that you can just dive on into myofunctional therapy is by taking an intro course. If you've been in any myofunctional therapy Facebook groups, you probably hear that people say, I took an intro course, something like that. Typically those intro courses are a week long, depending, I don't know how the online options are working, but pre-pandemic, pretty much a week long, and you would get a full just immersion into assessment, intervention, treatment, and all of the things. So definitely a really great, like, this is all of the things with myofunctional therapy. One part of a lot of the intro courses is, and I won my skull. My group won our skulls, and we got to keep them at my intro course with Christy Gatto, which was so much fun. But we took the skulls, and then we got different colors of Play-Doh, multi-sensory, tactile. We're bringing in all the senses because, we got to keep ourselves going. And we got to make models of, like, all the different muscles. I'll have to go find my skull. All the different muscles of the face. We did, the epicularis oris, like all that type of stuff. And that was really, really a really fun, great hands-on activity. So those intro courses, typically for AOMT or IAOM, if you want to get their certification, their intro course is really like the first step in their certification process. Now, I'm going to be honest with you because your girl is realistic. One barrier to entry for intro courses is the price point, and I totally understand that. So I do want to make sure that as I'm giving you this information, I'm going to give you some different resources at different price points so that maybe you're not ready to fully invest in an intro course yet and you just kind of want to dabble. I am going to give you some sort of smaller resources later on in this episode. Just know if you want to take an intro course, it is going to be something that I would highly encourage you to look into all the different instructors, find someone that you feel is going to fit your learning style or whatever it is that you want. And it's probably going to be something that you're going to have to save up for. It's well worth it. But again, just being real and keep it at no fluff for you today. So let's say you're listening to that and you say, Danni, that's just really not an option for me right now. Or, yes, like I would love to save up for that, but it's going to take me 6 or 7 months to save up for that. What can I do in the meantime? Well, I gotcha. Okay. So one sort of like step under that from an intro course is an amazing resource that I actually partake in myself. It's called the Myo membership with Hallie Bulkin. It's a really great monthly membership that she has monthly trainings. And once you sign up, you have access to all of the previous trainings. So you can just go like binge watch all of them. And she goes over various topics in the Myo world. And like I said, she has speakers that come on and do different trainings. And she also has a private Facebook group that has mentors, and all of the mentors actually have their comm and they can answer different questions that you have, or if you want to bounce ideas off of people in the Facebook group with different patients. There's case studies. So it's a really great resource. Like, I've taken an intro course and I still find it very valuable. Again, I have no financial relationship with it at all. I pay full price for my membership. I just find that it is a great resource, and Hallie's put together a really great program for you. Another resource that you have available to you that has some smaller courses, not necessarily intro courses, is with Linda Dinofrio. I'm going to link, I believe she has a website to all of her courses and I'll link that in the show notes. I have not taken any of her courses. I have heard amazing things about her courses. She's very knowledgeable and one of the big names in the field. She actually heads up one of the big free myofunctional therapy Facebook group that I'll also link in the show notes as well for you to go check out. But I've heard amazing things about her courses as well. She has, I don't believe she has an intro course or anything like that, but she does have different specific courses. So like she has specific things about R, specific things about our tick and feeding. So you can definitely go browse and see if if any of those courses or resources strike your fancy. So let's say that you're looking at me and you're like, Danni, I'm really on a budget. I would love to save up for all those courses, but even like a $200 course or something like that is kind of making me sweat a little bit. Don't worry, there's definitely something for you to, at least if you want to learn more about what myofunctional therapy is. I know for myself, I thought it was really beneficial to take some of these courses I'm about to tell you about so that I could really just have a better understanding of what it was, so that I could know if I was prepared to invest in more courses so that I could learn about that and learn about Myo and add it to my practice. So a great resource that I use and highly recommend, again, I have no current financial relationship with them, is Speech Therapy PD. So they are actually, I like this resource because if at the end of the day you take a couple of their Myo courses on there and you just decide, oh, I'm glad that I learned this, I now know when to refer out, but this really isn't for me, you still have access to all their other courses because it's like a speech therapy course membership. So you pay your yearly subscription fee, and then you have access to their whole course library. So you can actually just pay, I think it's like one something, you can actually just pay for that, and you can actually get all of your 10 yearly CEUs by just paying that one price. And they also happen to have some great Myo courses. Again, those are not going to be telling you details about assessment intervention. They're more of just like what is Myo, kind of dipping your toes in there. Like I think there's a course on R in speech therapy PD, I'm pretty sure. But that's a really great way if you're just like, I'm kind of interested, but I'm not fully ready to like dive in or even purchase something that's a couple $100s. Well, this one's really great way because, again, say you just decide Myo's not for me. I'm glad I know about it, but you decide it's not for me. Well, you can just go take a bunch of their other courses that they have. They also have podcast courses, which is really cool, where you can listen to the podcast and get credit for it if you take their little quiz or whatever. So that's just super, super convenient. So that is also a great place for you to be able to start, is with a speech therapy PD membership. So that is all the resources that I'm going to include in this episode. Again, keep in mind, there are many other resources. There are other programs out there. I just kind of picked these because they're very well known and I have taken some of them personally. I like to be very open about the fact of whether or not I've actually taken something, because if I haven't taken the course, I can't speak specifically about the course. I can only say about what I've heard about it or what I've read about it. So again, this was not an exhaustive list, but this is a great jumping off point for you to be able to decide what's going to fit what your needs are right now and fit your budget and also your interest level. So all of those resources, I kind of gave you a range from like the top-notch, top dollar, top investment, most thorough, all the way down to something like, let me just dip my little toesies in the water and see if I'm cool with this, right? There's also a few other resources that are not necessarily specifically Myo or specifically SLP geared, but they're also amazing resources and I wanted to make sure that you got that information. So one training that I highly recommend and that I took myself is the TOTS, aka Tethered Oral Tissue Specialty Training with Autumn Reed Henning. She is actually a COM. She's actually one of the mentors in Hallie's Myo membership. And she was actually a guest on the podcast a while back. And she's just an all around amazing human being. She also is a lactation consultant. So be sure to go check out her episode. We talk a lot about private pay, private practice in that podcast episode. So be sure to go check it out. And her Instagram handle, I'll have that in the show notes, but she's at Chrysalis Oral Facial, I believe. But I'll have all her information in the show notes. Her course is super, super valuable. Although it's not specifically Myo, tongue ties and oral function is very much like a subset in the Myo space. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can definitely go check out her course. It was super informative and I highly recommend it. The next resource that you can definitely go check out is anything with the Breathe Institute. Now that is actually headed up by an ENT. His name is Dr. Zaghi. Is a very big name in the Myo airway space. That is very much like airway focused. So it's not specifically geared towards SLPs. It's very much about airway. But as you delve more into the myofunctional therapy space, airway and finding airway-centric providers like ENTs, dentists, orthodontists is super, super important. So he's got courses and resources on his website as well. I believe that they have a YouTube channel that you're actually able to watch some of the frenectomy, or he does a frenuloplasty procedures. So if you're kind of interested in like the ooey gooey anatomy stuff, he's another great resource to go check out. Another resource organization that is going to be super beneficial for you to look into is, okay, give me a little grace. I'm going to have to read this off my notes because I'm going to mispronounce it. Okay. The short is called ICAP, the ICAP, but ICAP stands for International Consortium of ANKLYLOFRENULA Professionals. So this is another group that's ANKLYLOFRENULA, fancy anatomical jargon for tongue ties. So again, this is not a specific group that is for SLPs, but this is for anyone who would be on that sort of TOTS team. You're gonna see RDHs, SLPs, OTs, PTs, dentists, orthodontists, ENTs. Again, when you get into myofunctional therapy, what you're going to quickly learn is that just because you're doing the therapy, you cannot do it alone. There's usually a lot of other moving pieces. Again, if we're looking at a child's airway, if we're looking at orthodontic history, or if they want to put braces on, things like that, it's very, very much a team and a very holistic approach. So joining these organizations or looking into these organizations or seeing anyone in your local area who are a part of these things can be really beneficial, because you're going to, if you want to get into myofunctional therapy, it's very important to have we call it like your team, and building your team of professionals that you can refer to in your area. The last resource that I'm going to tell you about is completely free and so valuable. So it is actually a free Facebook group. It is the Oro Myofunctional Study Facebook group. So that group is actually headed up by Linda Dinofrio, the person that I had mentioned earlier, who offers courses for myofunctional therapy. I believe she's doing a lot of online courses now as well. So you can definitely look into that if you're interested. But she heads up that group, and there's a lot of valuable information there. Again, it's very much an interprofessional group. You are going to find SLPs. You're also going to find dentists, orthodontists, ENTs. People ask questions. She has a lot of information in the file section that you can go look up. She's got evals that she's written. Such a great resource. Again, and it's free. Come on now. So you can go check that out and see if any of that information is going to kind of help you decide where you want to go from there. Okay, so I've given you like a ton of resources and information. So hopefully you're like feeling all tingly and happy inside, and you're gonna go jump up and enter the rabbit hole that is myofunctional therapy and decide if it's something you want to pursue. But before you do that, I do want to make sure that I give you a few pieces of advice and takeaways outside of just the resources if you are at the beginning of your myofunctional therapy journey. These are also going to be things that I wish that I knew before starting my myofunctional therapy journey. So even though I didn't get them before I started and I had to figure them out along the way, you get the cheat code. Congratulations. So first thing is, like speech therapy in itself, but I also think this really applies to myofunctional therapy, is it is a beautiful blend of art and science. And cookie cutter is not going to cut it with myofunctional therapy. There are programs out there, and one thing I've learned about Myo that's similar to how I feel about money and finances is that there really is no one size fits all program or a set of exercises. You always have to go back to, and it's the same thing with speech therapy, and it's the same thing with money, right? You always have to go back to why. You always have to go back to, what is my goal and how is this exercise going to get me there? What is my goal and how is this activity or this book going to get me there? What is my goal and how is this month's budget going to get me there? So that's definitely one thing, is that it's a blend of art and science. We're therapists. We're already used to thinking on our feet, and myofunctional therapy is no different than that. So you're definitely going to get to have fun with it and get creative and be prepared for that, and know that that's okay. One thing that I wish that I knew, or I guess one expectation that I wish I would have understood better going into my intro course, is that just because you take an intro course, like, you're not going to know everything after an intro course. I took my intro course through the IOM with Christy Gatto. She was a fabulous instructor. I'm so glad that I took the course, but the course is only 5 days. So you can imagine there's no way that you're going to be able to fit every single detail of myofunctional therapy into that 5 days. So I think that I needed to kind of curb my expectations a little bit with what we were able to get through in that 5 days. And Christy actually did a good job of talking to us about that in the course and kind of letting us know, like, this course, this course is like your first big step. I mean, yes, we're going to go over all the assessment and treatment, all those things, but also recognize like this isn't it, that you're going to have to continue learning. You're going to have to continue building your team in your area and kind of learning what practices are going to work best for you in your therapy style, while also continuing to learn more just about myofunctional therapy in general. So I think that sometimes people can be a little disappointed after an intro course, and it's not because it wasn't a great course, but I don't want you to go into it thinking you're going to be like a myo aficionado after an intro course. An intro course I feel like it's meant to be like that great baseline and give you like that very well-rounded, specific like assessment, intervention, exercises, all that fun stuff. But a big part of it is going to really be you. Like my goal after my intro course, when I got back, was I just wanted to put my hands on as many faces as I possibly could. I did a myo eval on my husband. I did an eval on a couple of my friends. And then my kids that were at the place that I was working at the time that I thought probably needed some myo help, but I just didn't know how to help them at the time. I actually kind of did like some assessments with them as well and just got in that practice. It's the same thing. It's the same thing like when you went to school for speech therapy. There's really nothing there's no class that's going to substitute for you getting out there and doing the dang thing, right? So that's just something that I want to make sure that people kind of curb their expectations a little bit whenever they go into these intro classes, and recognize that you also have to do the practice and you have to apply the knowledge whenever you get out of the intro course. And that's where you're really going to see that growth. And with that, you really just have to give yourself time and patience in order to learn and in order to practice. Another thing that I feel like I knew I would need to be prepared for, and we had some great conversations when I took my myo class with Christy about, but again, I'm here to just spread information and spread knowledge so that you can just know things that I wish that I knew. I do feel it's important to understand that you're probably going to need to be prepared to educate other providers on what myofunctional therapy is. I will say over the last probably 5 or 6 years, myofunctional therapy has grown in acceptance in the SLP world. But again, there still is this idea that of NSOMs, oral motor, and that is something I was taught in graduate school, that oral motor exercises are not evidence-based. And so really just, kind of putting your ego to the side and trying to be prepared to be a continual learner and just have calm and fruitful conversations with other practitioners, especially if you're trying to build your team of people that you can refer to in your area. So getting an orthodontist on board and a dentist on board and things like that. At the end of the day, it's not about our ego. It's about the well-being of those that we serve. And so I find the best way to do that is trying to have positive relationships and collaborations with the other professionals in my area. And just every conversation I have, I try to make super fruitful and super educational for us both. So that is all of the goodies and information that I have for you on this episode of the what, when, and how of my myofunctional therapy journey. I hope I was able to answer a lot of the questions that I get on my Instagram. And if you're not following me on Instagram, where you at, boo? At SpeechGoods, go do it. And make sure that you get those show notes, because all of the information and links to websites, Facebook groups, courses, and all those things are going to be in the show notes. So make sure you go check that out.